My name is Paul Barba. I'm an engineer here at Lexalytics. And I'm here today to talk about what we've been working on in Salience 5 ever since our last release. I'm really excited to share some of the stuff with you. I really like talking about what I do. So I'll get started. But I want to throw out that this is really, my goal here is to let you all know what new features we're building, what technologies are coming, so that you can take these sort of features at the sort of core API level and build cool new things with them or improve your existing products. So if you've got any questions, if things don't make sense, if you'd like clarification, we can play past the mic and get those answered at any point. So just throw up a hand or grab the mic if you've got a question. So on that note, let's get started. This is just a sort of the simplest timeline I could come up with for text analytics. And I hope here is to sort of contextualize where we came from, where we are, where we're going. So text analytics sort of branched out of search. That's sort of the earliest form of using computers to analyze text. I think we all know search. And where text analytics sort of came into its own was in answering questions where you didn't know ahead of time what you wanted to know. Search is great if you want to say, when was the Eiffel Tower built, or anything like that. But text analytics starts to say, hey, here's something interesting. Or, boy, you got a lot of data. Let me summarize that for you. So entity recognition is one of the core pieces of text analytics, of Salience, our text analytics offering. These are all the proper nouns: people, places, companies, products. Find these, we report on them. Then we added in themes. This sort of catches a gap. Entities are great for some of the information, but you also want some broader ideas. So using this sentence, oil spill is an important thing being discussed. You'd want to know about that. You get that out. And then you take these sort of two pieces. These end up as sort of hooks to connect other metadata to, the big one being sentiment. This has always been one of Lexalytics' core competencies, doing sentiment, taking the entities and the documents and attaching, is it good for them, is it bad for them? And I think if you look at that last, piece of metadata there, Barack Obama was positive in this sentence, the oil spill was negative. That gives you an overview of what was said, and you can now sort of roll this up. This is now, you went from unstructured text where they could have said anything to something very structured that you can now analyze, you can now sum, count, average, whatever you want to do. So that's sort of where we are now. That's the sort of current generation of text analytics. And looking forward, it seems like it's time to sort of step forward into the new frontiers. Seth mentioned the IBM Watson. And that's a great example of that's something different. That's a related space, it's its own sort of world, question answering. But you're starting to see these new technologies that understand language in a slightly different way. And we want to be on the forefront. We want to help push forward on what else can we do with technology? What else can we understand about text? So we looked at the issues that are out there, the problems that we just couldn't solve, that text analytics just sort of falls down on. And the common thread through most of them was always that you as a reader, you as a human, were bringing information to bear on a piece of text. So an example is, we'd like to connect all the mentions of an entity. So an article might talk about Microsoft, and then it might talk about some other companies, other people, and then it might say, the software giant said this. And you as a human know that the software giant, that must refer back to Microsoft, you can make that connection, but our software didn't know which of the companies that it would mention since it was referring to, or even is it talking about a big robot? It didn't know. So it's because you have information that the computer doesn't. Here's just a word, and this is what it looks like to our engine right now. It sees that it's 6 letters, it can part of speech tag it, it knows it's a noun, it knows how it could build this up into entities and stuff. But if you put history up there instead, it wouldn't really make any connection and any differentiation between the two. It would know that that's a word, this is a word, they're different, but they'd be more or less interchangeable. So that's an issue, and that's very different from what you as a human can bring to bear on reading text. You think of the word science, and there's all these different ideas and connections that can be made. You think of fields of science, you think of famous scientists, you think of the tools of science. These are all connections that you as a human can make, and the word science takes all these different ideas and sort of encapsulates it into a ball that you can reason about, that you can look at, and that you can take different perspectives on. Because the other interesting thing about language is it's very contextual. Each word influences the other ones. So when you take a sentence, it's not the whole, broad, everything that science could mean. Now this is starting to talk about sort of chemistry. This is starting to talk about specific ideas that you make the connections to, that you think about, and suddenly that turtle doesn't really make sense anymore. Einstein wouldn't really make sense anymore. So this is how you understand language. This is what we want to get our engine to work with, how we want it to understand language. And this is what we've been working on a lot in Salience 5, on replacing just very simple string matching or understanding part of speech and understanding some of these connections between the words. So that's been our goal. I hope you think that's kind of cool. We do. But so what? So at the same time, we really want to be on the cutting edge and think of all the cool technology we can. But at the end of the day, we need to connect it to your problems and to your customers' problems. So I'm just going to throw out one of the ways that, understanding words, not just as letters, but as the intersection of all different ideas, can help us deal with real-world problems. We've got a tag cloud here. I think you've all seen them, and a lot of you have used our software to make tag clouds. You take the engine, you get all the themes out of a piece of document or a collection of documents, and you display them to the user. And so as soon as we've had themes, people have been using them to display tag clouds. And from the beginning, we've gotten these questions. Well, I'm not really happy with the fact that gas prices, fuel prices, gasoline prices have all come up. They're all saying the same thing. Your tag clouds, your themes sort of overlap. What can you do about this? How can you solve this problem? And we never could solve it in a sort of general case. You can normalize, say, gas prices and gasoline prices are the same, but you need to know all the different ways it could be phrased. So starting in Salience 5, we can start rolling up themes into broader ideas. We use the connections that aren't necessarily straight string matches. Gas and fuel aren't the same. We aren't using synonym, thesauri, but they're looking at the connections, the ideas that each term evokes, and they're rolling it up into a much higher level. Now, this is all configurable. You could have the threshold really high, and you can get, very broad ideas, or you could just use it at sort of a low threshold, say, no, just things that are really, really the exact same, and just sort of clean it up a little bit. But you can see two different views of the data now, one on the right and one on the left, and the different levels. And you could use this as sort of an exploratory thing. You could look at, prices and drill down. What were the original phrases? Give me a little bit more information about this. But the data on the left, it's interesting, but there's a lot there. It was busy. This was an issue for you. This was an issue that people actually came to us and said, we don't like having all these themes. What can you do? And starting in Salience 5, we can start to help you with that. We can roll it up. We can give you big ideas. So that was just sort of a teaser, one of the things coming. I'd like to sort of swing back around now and go into a little bit more detail about each of these technologies, talk about how we're going to do it, talk about what we're going to give you. And then once we've covered the technologies, I want to just run through one sample application. We're an engine provider. We provide building blocks that all of you are going to take and make really cool things with. So just want to step through one possible thing you could make. There's all different things you can make, and hopefully as you think about your own problem domains, your own specialties, you can think of, hey, I could do X with this. So that's one thing to get your gears turning. And then we'll round out with what else is coming in Salience 5 and conclude from there. So here is the concept matrix. This is the sort of core piece when I talked about looking at words not just as letters, but as connections of ideas and emotions and thoughts. This is sort of what that's referring to. There's a lot here. It's very technical that I'd like to save for later, not get too bogged down in all the details. If you want to ask me about this afterwards, I'd love to talk about the specific techniques, the research papers we're going off of. But at this point, I just want to give a high-level view of what this is. And basically what we've done is we've taken Wikipedia, which is millions of articles, thousands and thousands of people have spent all these hours writing down just information about every single facet of our lives and every little fact and every little topic. And we sort of boiled that down into a structure that we can now look at and understand connections between words. So this will tell us, for example, that cat and lion, those are strongly linked concepts, and cat and giraffe. Well, there's something there, but it's not as strong. And cat and basketball, no, that doesn't make sense. There's really no connection there. So that's a sort of understanding. It's sort of looking at words, understanding where they fit in terms of each other. And so that's a concept matrix. This is going to power a lot of the features that I'll be talking about further on. So you say, boy, how can it do that without any configuration on my part? How is it going to know these things? The answer is probably the concept matrix. So again, I'll talk about this more in detail if anyone wants to talk to me afterwards on how it works. But are there any general questions at this point on what this is? Oh, here we go. No? Ah. So who is
So, sorry. Did you use Wikipedia as an example?
No, we processed Wikipedia. We downloaded the full gigabytes of text, and then we sort of boiled it down into a concentrated human knowledge.
And then if we would find that Wikipedia was not...
That's actually an excellent question. I was going to touch on that later.
Okay, sorry.
So no, that's good. That's you're on
Hold
top
that
of it.
question for the end.
Yes, we will get to that. Okay. So here's another new feature, collections. So right here we've got sort of a view that should look somewhat familiar to you. This should probably basically what a lot of you have built. You take Salience 4 and you run all your documents through it. You get out the entities, themes, sentiments, summaries, whatever you like to use from our product offering, and then you put it all into a database or an in-memory collection. You do something with it. And then once you've aggregated it all, now you can start asking questions about your data. You can say, okay, well, what are the top themes? What were the top entities? What were the top entities for this day? So this is sort of the current model. And this works really well. It works great if you've got, say, the Twitter fire hose and you've just got millions of articles coming through. But sometimes you have data that's all collected. And this can actually be a lot of work. You have to manage a database. You have to write this aggregation code yourself. This is another case where this is a real-world problem that people have come to us. They say, okay, we're getting all these individual results out. Now what? And we say, well, now write something to build that up. And they say, well, can't you just do that? So collections starts to say yes. What we're doing is we're looking at documents not just one at a time, but you say, here's a whole bunch of documents. It works well if you've got maybe consumer surveys. You've got 10,000 surveys that have all come out on the same topic. Or maybe you've got a new product release. So you collect all the documents, all the articles people have written about your product, and you put them all together, and then you say to Salience, okay, this is all one collection. Now tell me about it. What does this give you? Well, now we can aggregate these results. So we can tell you, well, here's your most positive results. Here's your most negative articles. We can start to tell you facts about that. So that's pretty cool. That's something you would have had to write stuff around databases on your own before. These are results that will start coming out of the engine. It's easier. This is also going to enable some of the new features I'm going to touch on, especially in the next slide. And then we're going to start using this to improve our internal results. If you have a bunch of articles on the same topic, we can start to make use of sort of the triangulation going on there. So if you're going to write like a research paper on whatever, World War II, you wouldn't just read one book and then write the paper. You know, it's much better if you can look at a few different sources and then understand a topic from a few different viewpoints. It also lets you understand the topic better, but it lets you understand the individual pieces of text better too, because you can sort of understand them in terms of each other. We hope that this will let us improve our results. But yeah, the key idea here is you just pointed at it. If this is what your data looks like, we can match how you view your data better, starting in Salience 5. So before I move on, any questions about collections? Sounds good. Oh, yes.
How big a collection can you handle?
So it does keep the documents in memory, so it's going to be largely dependent on how much memory you're willing to throw at the problem. I mean, tens of thousands are certainly not an issue. But the idea is that it's a sort of focused, you know, it might be, if you've got lots of data, it might be today's articles on this topic. If you've got consumer reviews, you know, then it might be this set of results. Yes, yeah, it's not really designed for millions of articles or anything like that.
So follow up, so you don't actually keep the articles, you keep the extractables
Yes.
in a collection?
Yes.
Okay.
So it will grow. The more you've got, the more memory it takes. But it's not a huge amount. So you can still have lots of data. And you can have lots of collections. There's no reason you couldn't have 8 threads running 8 different collections. Facets. So this is one I'm really excited about. I think this is best demonstrated by that sentence there in the middle bullet point. We say, you know, the bed was hard. Are there any entities? No. Are there any themes? No, we actually don't catch any themes there either. Themes are a little bit broader. Something as specific as bed doesn't come through. It's just a noun. But that could actually be really interesting information. If you were a hotel, you know, operator, this is exactly actually what you're looking for out of your text. This is the information you want to find. So in Salience 4, what if this was your case? Well, you could do it, but you'd have to tell the engine what you're looking for. So if you said, I really care about beds, it would say, okay, let me tell you what people said about beds. What we're looking for in Salience 5 is to give you this functionality without having to configure anything. It'll find the interesting sort of subjects in your documents, and it will tell you about them. We think this is really important because, you know, just to use that hotel example again, okay, sure, bed sounds important if you're a hotel operator. But what if you, you know, say, opened a hotel that was near a fire station and fire trucks were waking people up in the middle of the night? Would you have thought when you're configuring the software that fire trucks is going to be an important theme I have to look for. Probably not. You're always going to miss something. Whenever you have to tell the engine, here's what I'm looking for, you're going to miss things that you don't know you're looking for. And those can be the most important. If you're already looking for them, then you've got some idea of how to handle this. But if something comes totally out of blue, out of left field, then if we can tell you right away, hey, this is happening, that can be useful. So here's some data we processed. We processed some cruise reviews, we processed some gaming reviews. The facets are sort of the subjects of your documents, and the attributes are the nouns and adjectives that they're discussed in terms of. And I think just looking at this sort of gives you a feel for the sort of data you'll be able to get out. They're each sort of unique, but it gives you a sort of high-level view. And again, you don't have to configure anything. We didn't tell it what to look for in terms of Connect. We didn't tell it that Connect was something to look for. This all just runs right out of the engine. Just a clean installation of Salience 5. It'll start telling you things like this. And on one hand, it gives you sort of an overview of the space. Connect, people are saying motion tracking. That makes sense. That's the big feature of that product. You'd be worried if that didn't come through. We made the top results, but PlayStation didn't. That gives you some information about the marketing position. And the ship, beautiful, clean, new, huge. You look at this information, you can be saying, okay, good. People are pretty happy with my ship. Now let me move to the next facet and see if there's any issues there. So again, it's no configuration needed. It gives you a high-level view. And one thing that really excites me about this, and someone touched on it earlier in one of the earlier presentations, is sort of finding actionable things, finding cases where I can solve a problem here. I think that these facets are often going to end up being the places where the abstract world of text, these sort of all this general unstructured data, and the real world things that you as a company can influence are going to meet. Connect is a product. You can advertise, you can message, and the ship is something that you're producing, you're offering people. So if instead of ship being neat and tidy, it had said ship messy, dirty. Well, just looking at that one quick result, if you were a cruise line review or cruise line manager, you could say, hey, that's bad. What's going on? And then you could talk to your cruise line, whoever's in charge of the maids, and say, is it a staffing issue? Is it a timing issue? People coming on and off the boat too soon to each other? The point is that a lot of these feel actionable. There's something you can do with this data. So this is what Facets gives you. It gives you a new way to understand your data, new information, new messaging. You can drill down into these results. You can see there's counts there. So if you want to see more about why people thought the Connect was stupid, you can go back to the original articles and dig deeper. There's a lot of different things you can do here. I hope you can, think of some of your own. And that's Facets. Question?
I have 2 questions.
Okay.
I'm really excited about this, by the way.
Cool.
First of all, is there any noise that comes out of it? So things, for example, is kind of pointless. So do you just get everything in the kitchen sink?
So there's both. So there's some logic already in there to deal with some simple things. There's normalization, there's blacklists. If you can say, don't tell me something, we'll ship with a slightly better one than now. As you say, there's certain terms that just don't mean anything. And you can configure it.
Oh, okay. That was my second question.
Yeah. If you want to say, don't tell me this, then it won't tell you that. Yeah, we really, like to configure it. Yes. We think that's important.
Could you maybe explain a little bit more the difference between facets and themes and
Yes.
their overlap or their...
Right, and entities gets in here too, because there are 3 different sort of things that we talk about. All right, so themes are 2-word phrases. They're sort of broad ideas that happen in an article. And they're, things like oil spill. They're sort of topics. There's certain grammatical structures you find. What happens with facets is facets are the subjects of sentences. These will be, in your collection, any subject that comes up multiple times. So in multiple sentences in the cruise review, people said, the ship was, or the ship, drove. They said something about the ship, or they said something about Connect, where the Connect was the subject. And these are just sort of nouns. So one of the interesting things is that facets and entities sort of overlap. Because you can see Connect, that's actually an entity. This is a product. This is something we could find today. But because it was being used as the sort of subject of a sentence, it comes through. So it's related to entities, but it's broader because it includes general concepts. Ship would not be an entity. And not every entity is going to come through, because if the entity is only talked about, as the object of sentences, if it isn't really discussed, but it's only sort of mentioned tangential in one of the articles in your collection, it won't come through. These are sort of the big ideas, especially when you look at the counts and you start sorting them, you get the big ideas in your articles.
I just wanted to elaborate. So the key point, I think, is that this is the important sort of subjects, right? It's not, themes is everything, right? You pump a document through and you get, 80 themes out of a document. You're going to get a much smaller number of facets. These are sort of the important things you need to know as decided by the machine. But basically, this is what's going on that you should know about, and then the attributes for
Yeah,
it.
absolutely.
So parts of speech, the attributes could be intransitive objects, could be
Yeah.
adjectives.
They're nouns or
adverbs.
adjectives.
Oh, just adjectives. yeah.
Nouns or adjectives.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay.
Yep. And these are the prepositions and transitive, those sort of things. There's a few different patterns around it, but basically it's a subject, verb, object sort of pattern.
And does facets only work on collections?
Yes, because what we try to do is we try to aggregate lots of information across these. We found that we get much better results. They start to look really good when you've got a collection.
And do collections work? You kept talking about collections being based on topic, but kind of in my business, it's based on time delineated collections of documents. So would it still have the same applicability?
Yeah,
The
so
idea
yeah,
of a
it would be
collection?
a slightly different view, but that's fine. So you run everything for the day or whatever. You'll get. I think it works a little bit. I like the way it worked when you've got a sort of on-topic thing, because then you're seeing this concept, this discussion, and you're seeing the things pop out of it, as opposed to time, which can be very broad. It can have a bit of everything. But if that's what you want to see, if you want to see a little bit of everything, that's fine. You can build those collections too. Yep. Never asked that.
I just thought, in regard to naming reviews, I'm curious about whether that's an attribute or would that be a facet?
Yeah, that's a good question. I suspect you probably would have looking at this data, you would have gotten it as both. And we may have been discussed in terms of connect as well. But basically, the facet is the subject of the sentence. So all the times it was people probably saying, the connect is better than we, is like the we, when they were comparing it. And if the people were also saying the we is like the connect, then you would get both. So there can be some symmetry, especially as you get lots of data. You'll start to see, any of these comparisons happen with both grammatical phrasings. Okay, want to do the? I can. All right, I can repeat the question too.
Thanks. Actually, two questions. One is, does that mean that you can only link an attribute to a facet if they occur in the same sentence? In other words, something, something, something. On the other hand, the we does blah, blah, blah.
Yes. No, so it doesn't do, cross sentence connections, and that may be something coming. We're really trying to, with Salience 5, focus on here's some cool new things we can do them well. That's an excellent point. There is some more information at a deeper level that we can get to next
Okay.
user group.
The other one is, can you see, just for the noun attributes, the sentiment associated with those attributes and that facet?
Yes, excellent question. Yes, this will be connected to sentiment, so you will also be seeing that the beautiful ship is a good thing, and that maybe some of these, something may be coming across as neutral. We're going to do sentiment analysis of these connections, so that's a whole other level of information that we didn't display here. But you're also going to get sentiment, so that's makes it that much easier to glance at it and say, oh, here's the good things, here's the bad things.
So if you don't cross sentence boundaries, you have a review that says, I really love the Royal Canadian Cruise Line. The ship was beautiful, spacious, blah, blah, blah. How do you know what ship the review is talking about?
Yeah, so in this cruise review, in this particular instance, the collection was, we looked at, reviews for a ship. It was a review site. We looked at those. In that case, it wasn't an issue. You're right, the sort of mentioned linking is going to be an issue in certain data sets.
Well, especially if reviews have comparisons. The cruise I took last year, the ship was blah, blah. Then you potentially misattribute. Okay, you finish the sentence.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. And again, this is something that, we're going to have to do a few iterations to get to that level of understanding, because that, again, gets to this sort of nominal reference, figuring out when any given term is talking about a specific instance, or even within a review ship, the ship could be used in a generic sense. There's a million different issues there that we're slowly working through. In this case, it's going to work a little bit better, as you say, either if the text is very focused, as review data often is, or if you get things like people or entities where it's clear which ones they refer to. Also things like bed. The bed was hard is another example where you don't, that doesn't, ship does refer to a specific named ship. Some of these are slightly more generic. So yes, that's an issue. That's something we're going to continue working to address. In this case, we do not have that level of resolution.
You mentioned subject, verb, object. Maybe I'm getting ahead of this, but have you also dealt with verbs, so merge, attack?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So yes, it's not just like was, is. We look at all different verbs. We find some verbs work really well. Some don't create as good of attributes. So this is all ongoing research. We're finding which ones are best, but it's really any verb. So attacked, yes, it will pick up on those, and it will understand, the sort of attacking link. And losing the verb in this information, sometimes you'll have to say, oh, why did this come up? But you can always click on these results, and we give you the whole set of results. So if you want to look back to understand why things are coming through, you'll have that information. When you build applications, you can make nice drill down sort of things where, oh, I'm interested in this. Let me find out, what caused it to be positive. Let me see what sentences brought this into this data. So that's facets. So theme rollup. This is what I touched on at the beginning. Rollup is one of the cool things we can do now with this sort of concept matrix. You have a bunch of data, and then we extract a bunch of themes. And if you look at this, you as a human can start to make connections here. Beautiful views, scenic views, these are similar sorts of ideas. We run these through the concept matrix to understand them in terms of ideas and to see the connections. And when things are very connected, we can roll them up. And again, this is configurable. There's going to be sliders. You can control how much roll-up you want. So wet road, icy terrain, deep potholes, they're all talking about, driving was kind of hard. So it can make those connections. It can roll that up. But if you don't want that degree of roll-up, you could also set it lower, and then just sort of beautiful views, scenic views, which is saying the same thing, would come through. And again, you can always drill down, as I touched on earlier, and get the information out, the original results. And again, you don't have to configure this. There are no white lists. There are no normalization. Tell me that wet road and icy terrain are the same. It's using the concept matrix, which is a sort of boiled down knowledge about the world, to do this. So it's very easy. You'll get this just out of the box. You don't need to spend a lot of time configuring it. So you can do that today with Salience 4. We're trying to make this as easy as possible to get these sort of results. And facet roll-ups, same idea. We talked on the facets and attributes earlier. Both of those might have the same issue, where you say, boy, people are saying the same thing in all these different ways. It's making my data dirty. What can you do? Same thing, same technique. We get the roll-up there. And I think this sort of touches on an interesting reason this is so important. So if you look at employee, right on the left, we see that the top mentioned result there was motivated. And then we look on the right, and we see that smart/intelligent, after we rolled it up, is the most important concept. So sometimes what happens is, if you look at just result counts, the most popular results, the most discussed results, are going to be the ones that are hardest to reword. If there's only one way of saying something, that everybody who says it that way. And then something else like smart, they might say brainy, smart, intelligent. There's all these different ways they word it. So the influence gets sort of fuzzed out, gets spread across all these different terms, so it falls to the bottom of these lists. By doing this roll-up, you can sort of understand the data in a cleaner way, because now you see this is the top result, and it really is. It isn't just that this was the hardest one for people to say in multiple ways. Same basic technology, use the semantic, the concept matrix to roll these results up, and it makes it easier to deal with. And here's just sort of a different tack. This is, again, the concept matrix, but this is a totally different use case. This is the last main feature that we're bringing out in Salience 5.0. So here's a problem statement. You have just a general purpose taxonomy. You want to understand the world in very broad terms. And so you've got things, food, business, energy. And let's just look at food for now. How would you define food? How would you try to say, these articles are about food and these aren't? This is actually pretty easy for us as humans. But if you think about, well, what terms make something about food? Well, if it says food, that's a good clue. But maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's a recipe. And it just says, BLT. So really, to connect all the ways someone could say food, you really have to know all the different foods there are. And you have to say, okay, if they're talking about lettuce or broccoli or cauliflower, anything like that could be about food. That's a lot of work. You're never going to make a full list of all the ways someone could say this. You're always going to miss things. And this is going to be really labor intensive. for something broad category like this, what we did is we just ran some tweets through the engine, and all we did was we said, give us some broad topics like food. This was what we defined. And we said, food is a concept topic. What can you tell us matches this? And here are some of the results we saw. And so if you look at these, I picked ones where it didn't actually use the word food. So Brussels sprout salad. It knows through the concept matrix that food and Brussels sprouts and food and salad and food and fat, these are all connected. And so it can make these connections for you. And this sort of lets it operate on a level that's closer to what you as a human operate on. Instead of us having to speak the language of the computers, we're trying to move the computers to speak the language of humans a little bit better. So for broad categories like this, these are the results you can sort of see with the concept topics. Again, because it's just one word, because that's all you have to define, it's very easy to try out. You can just run some data through, see if these categories work, try a few different versions. It's very low maintenance, very low configuration. So you can very quickly see if this works for whatever your taxonomy is. It works really well for very broad, sort of general discussions, things that Wikipedia knows a lot about. It won't always work for very hyper-specialized domains. But again, it's almost a no-cost thing to run the engine across some data with a broad topic of what you'd like it to see and see if it can get you some results. That's concept topic. Yes. Moving the mic. Sorry.
This is also really awesome. I'm just like over here grinning. I know. I have created the long list of foods, by the way. It's awful.
Yes.
I think you probably have. My first question is, can we, or I guess, and this will answer, yeah. So can we teach the concept matrix? So for example, if I've got the Big Mac, for example, and I want it to recognize that a Big Mac is food, Wikipedia might already know that, but if it doesn't, can I tell it that it's food?
Yes and no. So, I mean, what I've been actually impressed actually going through this is how much Wikipedia really does know. Like I've learned things, like one of these was Savage Special of the Day. I had never heard of that. It's like a pita with fried eggplant and eggs in it, something like that. And it knew that, and I didn't. So it knows a lot. And yeah, you can certainly build off of this, and potentially use traditional techniques on top of the concept, matrix, after the fact to do some of the stuff that it misses out. And again, we'll talk a bit more about grounding the concept matrix in other domains later on in the presentation. But for the most part, you just write a few terms. And if you're missing something like Big Mac, you could always say food, Big Mac, and it would give you a little bit more, you can do a little bit more specialization. It doesn't just have to be one word.
Do you want to explain a little bit about the structure of the queries that you use for this?
Well, in this
so
case,
with respect to, yeah, I know it was just food for this, but we have a sort of a not and in context of.
Yeah. If you need to differentiate, there are some slightly more advanced things that if you want to say a little bit about. I can't think of an example in terms of food, but if you want to use terms, for example, that mean more than one thing. So like bank, but you're really looking for rivers. Then you could do bank, not financials, and you can sort of control this intersection of ideas. So the concept matrix is all about this sort of collection of which thoughts, which Wikipedia articles are relevant here. If you need finer grained control, in an actual production environment to get a little bit more detailed, we'll give you that power. But a lot of it you can achieve without worrying about any sort of advanced operators, out anything like that. A lot of this you can just do with words and phrases.
Is there any ability to actually see how it got to this conclusion? Any type of output, like debugs, where because I was looking through the results that you ran for me, and a lot of stuff got filed in construction, for instance, and it was about like Dairy Queen. I think it was about food.
Yep.
Right. So just trying to figure out what are those connections it's making, so we could understand better how to then possibly negate or fix
how to deal with
the matrix.
Yeah, that isn't in there right now. I don't know if I can say for certain what functionality will be there, in the 5.0 release. But that's, excellent concern that you need some information for dealing with this, and we'll see whatever we can do to get this information to you. in an easy and understandable way as possible. Part of the challenge is it's like, 60,000 articles end up sort of contributing a tiny piece, to it. So I've got to work out how to get this information to you in a way that's actually useful. But it's certainly something we will work on and look into in the next however many months, 4, 5. All right, can we pass the microphone backwards? Yes, indeed. Good stretch. Spoke too soon.
Thanks. Hi. A bit earlier, you talked about how your concept matrix, you're able to sort of, when you're trying to group your different concepts together, you're able to sort of set a precision level where you can have more groups or less groups. How granular is that? Is that at like a number from 1 to 10, or is it?
So right now it returns its confidence in terms of just a real number, so a decimal expansion.
Okay.
And we're going to be working on making sure that stays accurate, and then, making sure that when it says it's confident, it definitely is confident. But you'll have a very fine-grained control. It's just a real number. You'll be able to control, I only want you to be positive you're giving me this information, or you can say, just give me more or less everything, and I'm going to look through on my own. I've got my own humans who are going to, do a second pass and get it right.
So it's like a distance calculation sort
Exactly.
of? Okay.
Yep. There's a distance measure at the, at the internal of all this. It's saying how similar are your articles to this query, or how similar are these two themes.
And how fast is it?
So we are internally committed to keeping our current benchmark, which is 2 documents per second per core. So that's what we always as a development team look at. So whenever we want to make a new feature, we make sure what's already there continues to be fast. So this is a really fast technology. We've been working really hard to keep it from getting bogged down. So, if you like the things you're seeing, you should be able to do it with what you've got now without, many more machines or anything like that. And if you don't want these new features, then as Moore's Law keeps getting the computers faster, you're just going to be able to process more and more documents with basic Salience functionality in the same span of time.
Does it increase the amount of RAM the Salience object uses when you start it up?
Yep. It's one concept matrix for all your threads, so it isn't per thread growth, but it's a lot more RAM, and the download size will be a lot bigger to use this. There's only so small we can condense human knowledge and still have access to it.
All right.
But
Thanks.
it should all fit, on a modern computer. We're not talking about 16 gigabytes of memory or anything. It'll be, reasonable size, something that could run on your laptop.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, so those are, the main features in Salience 5. And I'd like to just now walk through just one sort of simple application, something that in one domain you could build to show how each of these features could fit together. Because really they're building blocks. And I think if you think about your problems, you'll be able to think of ways that each of these features could help. So let's say you are a PR firm, right? And you've got messages you want to get out. You've got a new, might be easier for some of you than others. You've got a message you want to get out. You've got a new product. Maybe it's a smartphone. You're releasing it. And what you're going to do is you're going to start this process out by writing a press release. And you've got your key messages. These are things that you think are going to sell your product, reasons people are going to choose you over the competition. So you write your press release to try to get people excited about that. And then it gets out into the world, and what happens? It just gets rewritten over and over and over again. Every person you send it to, summarizes it, writes your article a bit differently, and then other, locations, especially social media, blogs, are going to read about this product, and they're going to write their own takes, their own opinions, their own prognoses. And then people are going to get the product, and they're going to review it. And this might be influenced by what they've read, which was ultimately influenced by what you wrote in your press release. But it's their own take. It's sort of out of your control. And so you want to now understand how you're doing. Are your messages getting across? But part of the problem is that this has been rewritten in a million different ways. So what happens? How can you use our new features? First of all, you get all your results in, right? You've got your feed of product reviews, of Twitter Firehose data that applies to this product. And you put it all into a collection. This is, a great case where collections make sense, because here's all the data about this product. Let me put it all together and then ask questions of it. Then you can use the existing Salience features like themes and sentiment, and you can also use new things like facets. So you use battery life as an example message you might want to get across, that it's got a long battery life. Well, you can look at the facets. Battery should probably come through. And then you can see, okay, well, what are people saying about battery? And is the sentiment here positive or negative? So that just gives you one view. You look at the facets, you've got some idea of what people are saying about your product. And another thing you can do here is you can define concept topics and match each of these reviews, each of these facets, each of these things back to your original messaging. And this is really important because of the fact that your message isn't going to come across verbatim from what you sent out. So if somebody says runs 3 days without a recharge, they're talking about the battery life. What we hope is that concept topics can help you count that. This is something that would be very hard to count before. Again, you'd need to write all the different ways these things could be said. And now you can see that, oh, good. Well, 2 of my messages were, came through the data. And you can see which messages didn't get picked up. And then now you can iterate again and say, oh, okay, well, lightweight didn't get picked up by people discussing this topic. So what can I do? Can I advertise that better? Do I want to change my messaging? You've got information now, though. The idea is to take this unwieldy set of 10,000, a million, whatever it is, reviews, news articles, etc., and understand them in the terms that matter to you, which in this case is your key messaging. So I hope that explains one way of putting these features together. Again, collections to group it all, facets to get some more information you might not have seen before, messages you might want to hear. Use concept topics to organize it back into language that you care about, and then iterate through. And if instead of press releases you had some other piece of data, you'd have a new application. And if you change the order a little bit, you can build other applications. But I hope this gets your gears turning on just one way of putting this stuff together. All right, what else? What else is coming in Salience 5? And Salience options are actually already in the engine, and some of you have benefited from these. One of the interesting things we found is that each of you has your own needs. Everybody's text is different. So there was an example of this. We're talking about user-defined entities. When you say, tell me when Ford shows up and tell me when Ford Focus shows up. But those two sort of overlap. So we asked our customers, well, what do you want us to do in that case? Do you want us to tell you both? Or do you want only one thing, each word to only be part of one entity? And I think about just under half of you said, oh, we really need both those occurrences to come through. That's really important to us. And just under half of you said, no, that would be bad. Don't let them overlap. And the remainder said, we want both. So there's only so much we can do with one configuration to meet everybody's needs. So we're really trying to outfit as much of the engine at the low level with options. And most of these you'll be able to ignore. But the thought is that sooner or later, everyone's going to say, boy, I wish the engine worked this way. And our hope is that we've already addressed that so that you can just flip a switch somewhere in the engine and get it to work what you need. Because it's amazing how many different sizes, quality of text, what you're trying to get out of it. It's all different. We want to make sure we meet everybody's needs, and this is how we're going to do it. We're adding Spanish and Portuguese support. This is going on right now. We've got contractors marking up all these languages. This is in addition to French, which is there in Salience 4.4. We're going to continue rolling out languages, making sure Salience works in all these different languages. And there's a note there, for Salience 5, we're not going to support some of these advanced features that I've been talking about today. We want to make sure we get any of the kinks out in a language that we, the support team, the development team, understand fluently. So if you say, hey, what does this result mean? We can at least understand the language. That isn't to say that they aren't coming. They certainly are. We're going to work on that. But for the initial release, we're focused on English so I can get everything working well in English before attacking these other languages we support. And then I've talked about a lot of new features. I'm sure you all still care about, though, the core features from Salience that you know and love, sentiment being one of them. We're going to continue improving the existing things. And what the big one in Salience 5 is we're going to take subjective and objective sentences into account. And we're going to use that information to do a better job scoring sentiment. So this means cases where you say, I saw the movie, it was great, versus, I've heard good things about this, I think I'm going to like this, where you're speculating about information. Different sort of languages used in those two cases. You can take different conclusions away from somebody believing something that hasn't happened yet versus stating their known opinion. So we're going to use that internally to give you some better results. We're going to keep trying to improve the core results. That's one of the big ways. And now we can get back to that question from earlier. We talked about how we used Wikipedia to power the concept matrix. We've done all this work to sort of wrestle it into a condensed form. That means that it really understands the world in a very broad way. And I talked about how, for example, concept topics works really well on a broad general concept, but if Wikipedia doesn't know about a topic, we can't really do much. You may have your own domains, sort of deep, narrow domains, with their own language, with their own big corpuses of data, that we could do the same sort of work we did internally. We could do that again and configure the engine to work in some totally different domain. And this is a level of configuration that's fairly new, that sort of touches the very roots of salience now. So you can really, in a way never before, very easily configure it to really know about whatever topic you care about. And here comes the mic again.
So are these concept sets do-it-yourselfers, or can we hire you guys to do it for us?
That is the only answer. Do you want to say anything?
So it's it's a not yet completely decided question, but the belief is we're going to have to build it for you at this point, because it's a fairly complex build to do one of these. This isn't something that's, you can just pour the data in, turn the thing, and say go. There's a lot of switches to throw to get it to build this. So what we did with Wikipedia would not be the same thing we would do with PubMed or something like that. So you'd end up throwing the switches a little differently. And so we're probably going to have to be involved. And so we're trying to figure out what how it gets done and how it gets paid for and all that stuff. We don't know is the answer right now.
Either way, it's fine.
All right, so just to recap what I've said, what's coming out in Salience 5. Actually, I'll start with the key ideas. What we've really tried to do here is make it as easy as possible to get at these functions without configuration, without having to spend a lot of time making lists. The idea is to have everything we talked about very easy to just get out of the box. A lot of these new features make it very easy to explore your data, to try to understand it in different ways. Concept topics are very easy to write because they're a word or two. You can run your content, write a concept topic, see what comes out. If you don't like the results, write something else, try again. It's easy to explore. Same with facets. You'll be able to drill down. You can look at high-level views or roll-up. You looked at the very broad roll-up. What are the broad concepts here? And oh, that concept interests me. Let me dig down deeper and let me see what themes got rolled up into this big theme. And oh, that one is actually really interesting to me. Let me click on that and see the original articles. So it makes it easier to understand your data in a sort of an exploratory manner. And these are really building blocks. These are individual features that both internally and you guys can put together in different ways. 5.1, 5.2, 5.3, we're going to be putting concept matrices together with our other internal features to power all sorts of new features. And again, you can take these features and put them together into whatever applications you want to. And again, the features are the concept matrix. This is the core piece that's got a lot of knowledge built into it. And it's powering a lot of the cool new things like rollup. These are collections, which are a different way of dealing with your data. And it's whenever your data is collected, whenever there's a common link, whenever you want to understand the data very easily, you want us to tell you, here's the top results, here's the average result, information like that. And then facets are just one more way, in addition to themes and entities and topics, to get information out, to see what's going on in your data. And the facet attribute really starts to tell a story in a way. So that is Salience 5. I hope that you saw at least something here that excited you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions now, or if we want to talk afterwards about some of the technical details, that'd be great too.